Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Lisa Letto from LL Medical English. I'm a premium preparation provider, and I'm the creator of the Medical English Learning Lab, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Today's webinar is the OET test for healthcare professionals who want to work in the UK and Ireland. It's the second in our series of opportunities around the world for the OET test. Last month, we talked about opportunities in the United States and Canada. So excited to be bringing the second of this series, this time focusing on the UK and Ireland. So today we are joined by Nadia Falou, who is OET's Regional Manager for Europe and Africa. She works closely with healthcare regulators, employers, and institutions who support OET candidates as they look to take the next step in their healthcare careers. So before we get started, just wanted to put a couple polls in the chat that people can answer just to see what professions everyone is in, and if you're already planning to do the OET exam. And you can answer those while I introduce Nadia. Oh, I'm going to introduce myself first. So 1 second. So I'm Lisa Letto. I'm from Canada originally. I was a trained dietitian in Canada, and I moved to Madrid in 2013. And I can relate to learning a language, as I learned Spanish as an adult. I didn't know any Spanish almost before I came to Spain. I have been teaching medical English for about 11 years. I started my business here in Spain in 2015. I am a premium preparation provider with a premium preparation partner with OET, and that is a special designation that you get by doing a special training program that they have. And I'm also, something very unique with my business, I think, is that all of the teachers that we work with have a dual background. So they have a background in healthcare, so it could be a nurse, a doctor, medical editor, or dietitian like me. And we also have English language training. So combining those things, so when you talk with us, you can talk about anything about your work and we'll understand what you're talking about. So let's see. So our special guest today is Nadia. And in this session, she is going to provide an overview of the OET test, give some information on who accepts the OET test in the UK and Ireland, and what support is available for OET. So over to you, Nadia.
Thank you so much. And it's such a joy to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for your time to join today's webinar. And a huge thank you to Lisa for inviting me along to be a speaker in the second of this series, today talking about the OET test for the UK and Ireland. A very quick introduction to myself. So my name's Nadia Falou. As Lisa said, I'm Regional Manager for Europe and Africa at OET. I joined the organisation 3 years ago, but prior to that, I worked in a language school for 10 years. So my background is in English language teaching, learning and assessment. And in my career as well, I was a test venue manager. So I ran a number of high stakes tests, OET being one of them. So throughout the last decade, really, I've had the joy and privilege of meeting so many incredible international healthcare professionals along their journey to registration. So it's such a joy to be here with you today, to be part of your journey as well. And I hope that you'll find the information I'll be sharing today useful. So in the session, I will be giving you quite a lot of information, which I hope you'll find useful. But I do have one question in the poll, if I may ask, and that's just to see where you're up to in your journey. So in the options, option 1 is if you're thinking of coming to the UK and Ireland in the next year. Please select that option. Option 2 is maybe you're thinking of coming in the next 2 to 3 years. And finally, option 3, maybe you're not sure yet. You're just here to find out a little bit more information to see if it's right for you. Wherever you're up to in your journey, welcome. And I hope that you'll find some of the information I'm sharing with you of use, not just to help you with your registration, but also how the OET test is going to help you from day one in your job in the UK and Ireland to help you succeed, integrate and thrive. So as mentioned today, I'm going to go into the OET test. We're going to look at what the test covers and how that relates to real life. We're going to look at the regulators in the UK and Ireland who accept the test. I'll then tell you about how you can book your exam. We'll talk a bit about scores and how to share your results, and then I'll share some further information on support we have available from OET. But I think it's really important to start with the importance of communication in healthcare. My background is in languages as well, so I know what it's like to learn another language and go to another country where that first language is not your own, and the nerves that you get the first time you pick up a phone and you have to speak in another language. But I've also had that experience. So English is my first language, but I've been to other English-speaking countries where the way they speak is also different. And the thing is about language, I often hear language is difficult. I understand what that means, but personally, I find it more complex rather than difficult, because you're constantly thinking about the type of language you're using depending on who you're speaking to. So with English, the way you'll speak English with friends and family, that's going to be very different from the type of English you will use in training, which is more like your medical English, how you write essays. It's different from the type of English you're going to use in business, for example, how you do your presentations, negotiating. And it's very different to the unique skills that healthcare professionals use, which are clinical communication skills. And these are really advanced communication skills that are essential for patient safety and quality care. So what do we mean by clinical communication skills? I'm aware, talking to you as healthcare professionals, you will have advanced knowledge and terminology that you use within the field of healthcare. You'll use terms which, for me as a patient with no healthcare background, I wouldn't understand. And when you're in the workplace, you will be expected to use those medical and technical terms when you're speaking to fellow healthcare professionals. You'll be expected to speak to them in a very clear, concise, factual way, using the right terms. And then shortly after that conversation, you might find yourself with a patient where you've got 5 to 10 minutes to then explain maybe the same thing to them, but using language they understand. So essentially, you're translating that medical terminology into what we call lay language so that the patient can understand what you're saying. You also have to provide it to them in a way that they can understand. So not too much information, but not too little information. Are you checking the information as you're going along? Are you actively listening to them? Are you picking up on a cue that they are saying? And all the time, are you showing empathy to really incorporate that patient-centered care? And that's fundamental to inspiring trust, which is so important for effective communication with patients. We're going to be talking about regulators throughout my session, but what you'll find when you come to register in the UK and Ireland, healthcare regulators have what we call codes of conduct or standards. And essentially, these are principles that you have to abide by when you are registered with them. And what you find in all of their codes of conduct, clear communication is always key. And that reflects exactly what we've talked about here, because it is so important for that patient safety and quality care. Now, it might go without saying that poor communication in healthcare can have serious consequences. I think it's also important to remember communication is two-way. So let's imagine you're working in a healthcare setting in the UK and Ireland, and you get given you receive a letter. It's a referral letter. It's very nicely written. There are no grammatical mistakes. It's well structured, but as you're reading it, you don't really know what's being asked of you for the ongoing care of that patient. So as a result, you're going to have to go back to understand and get more information. That's going to create a discontinuity of care. And all the time, the patient doesn't know what's happening, and there are delays being experienced, and you're in a situation where you can't provide the information because you don't have it. This can lead to patient dissatisfaction. They can get more anxious, they can get more frustrated, in some cases more angry when they don't know what's going on. The same if they are not understanding information that's being given to them because it's not clear, or you're using terms that they don't understand. That can cause a lot of frustration, and it ends up breaking down the relationship because of those miscommunications. Sadly, in really serious situations, it does compromise patient safety. And sadly, there was a situation in the UK, I think it was last year, there was a miscommunication on a call between bleeding and breathing. Now, there are pronunciation differences, but a key one is the difference between the L at the beginning, where the tongue goes up, and breathing, where the tongue is down at the beginning. Because of that miscommunication, sadly, the emergency services didn't get to that patient in time, and sadly, the patient passed away. So clear, concise, and effective communication is fundamental, where there can be no ambiguity and no miscommunication of the situation. And finally, it leads to an inefficient use of valuable resources. And remember, your time is so valuable. Both in the UK and Ireland, you're going to have really busy days and only limited time, sometimes only 10 minutes with your patients. So in that 10 minutes, there's so much you can do if the communication is clear and effective. So that's where the OET test steps in. So we are an English language test that is specifically designed for you as healthcare professionals. And not only are we designed for you, but we work with subject matter experts who are healthcare experts for every single question that goes into the OET test to ensure it's fit for purpose. Every part of the OET test, which I'm going to talk to you about, is related to healthcare. So you don't need to worry about topics such as maybe the environment or something like that coming into the test. I will point out we're an English language test, so we're not assessing your medical knowledge. We're not here to assess your medical training or your background. We're here to assess your English in a healthcare context. And we're backed by research. So we've worked with experts in the field, such as Dr. Jonathan Silverman. If you're not aware of him and his work, he actually worked on the Cambridge Calgary Guide for clinical communication skills, which is used in medical schools around the world. So we worked with him as we put our tests together so that we are actually incorporating those clinical communication skills. And I'm going to tell you more about that a bit later. And finally, we're majority owned by the University of Cambridge. So with that comes the expertise and knowledge and research backed in our test. And I'm very proud. I'm actually employed by Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and I work on the OET test. And the purpose of everything that we do is that we want to ensure that all of our candidates who are taking our test have the relevant communication skills to help them integrate, succeed, and thrive from day one in the English-speaking healthcare workplace. So we do realize at OET, sometimes communication can differ between some professions. So there are 12 different versions of our test. And it's really important to highlight this, particularly when it comes to booking your test and registering. You have to take the test that's specific to your profession. Now, that might sound quite obvious, because if you're a nurse, why would you book a test for one of the other professions? But it's just really important that we highlight this so that from the point of booking and even from the point of preparation, you're doing the right preparation for the right version of the test. So doctors, you'll be doing the test for medicine, and so on with the other professions. We are a global exam, so we have test venues all around the world. You can do the test on paper or on computer at a test venue, and if there are locations where we do not have a test venue, we do offer the OET at-home test as well. However, it's really important to point out that regulators do have different requirements. So some of them will not accept, for example, the at-home version of the test. We'll be talking about regulators on my next couple of slides, but this is just something to point out at this point that you need to remember at the time of booking. So 1, the right profession for your registration, and 2, check the version of the test that you can use for registration. So now let's go into a bit more detail about the OET test for the UK and Ireland. So we're really proud to be recognised by healthcare regulators, employers, education institutions across the UK and Ireland. Due to time today, I won't be able to go into each one to tell you the specific grades, but it is really important to point out that we don't speak on behalf of regulators here at OET, so it's really important that you go to the regulator website to get full information about their registration process, but also about the scores that you can use. So nurses, you're looking to register with the NMC, or the Nursing and Midwifery Council. They do have a policy where you can combine your OET test results as well. So for information on this, please do go to their website. Terms and conditions do apply, but they also have a wonderful tool called a test combining calculator that you can use to help you check your eligibility and also if you can combine your results. Doctors, you will be registering with the General Medical Council. You do need to do your OET test before you book your PLAB exams, but because of those clinical communication skills, you'll certainly find that those skills will help towards your PLAB 2 exam. Pharmacists, if there are any of you on the call, you can register using OET with the General Pharmaceutical Council. For HCPC, this is for allied healthcare professionals, HCPC regulate a number of different professions. And because OET is profession specific, they only accept OET for the professions where we have a test. So there are 6 of them that you can use. So those would be dietitians, radiographers, speech and language therapists, podiatrists, physiotherapists, and occupational therapists. So if you're one of those professions, you can use the OET test for your registration. Something to point out, HCPC do not accept the OET at home test. So want to bear in mind. Vets, you can also use the OET test for your registration. And because we are recognised by the regulators, for those of you looking to work in the NHS, you can also use your OET for your job as well. So I'll tell you a bit more about how you can share your result. I'm sure many of you have heard about the slowdown in international recruitment here in the UK. You can still apply for jobs. There are still jobs available, but active recruitment, as we saw a few years ago, it's definitely slowed down. But if you go to the NHS jobs website, you will be able to see some jobs and you can apply through there. Final point for doctors, nurses and vets, if you are looking for settlement here in the UK, you can also use your OET test result for that. So for further information, please do go to the UK website, the UK government website, for further details. Now we're going to move over to Ireland, and we're really proud to be recognised by healthcare regulators in Ireland. So for nurses, you will be looking to register with the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland, or NMBI. Now, something to point out, the scores that they accept are very similar to the NMC, but they are also slightly different. So please do go to their website to have a look at the scores that they accept. And please also make sure you share your result at the right time of the registration process. So NMBI have actually just released a podcast called NMBI Voice. And late last year, they did do a session on registration. So if that's of interest to you, if you're looking to register in Ireland, I do strongly recommend that. Doctors, you will be looking to register with the Medical Council of Ireland, as again, so much information on their website to help you through that process, so please do go there. The Pharmaceutical Council for Ireland is the PSI, or the pharmacy regulator. They do allow a combining of results. They call it super scoring. So please do look on their website if you are a pharmacist looking to register in Ireland, for the details they have available. CORU is for allied healthcare professionals. So again, CORU will register a number of different healthcare professions, but they will only accept OET for the specific professions where we have a test. So please do go to their website for full details. We're proud to be recognised by the Dental Council as well, and the Veterinary Council. Now, something to point out in Ireland is that most of the regulators do not accept OET at home. CORU did change the regulation earlier this year, so they will now accept OET at home, but for the others, please do go to the website and double check. And one final thing, just to highlight, if you are planning to go to Ireland, you'll notice that on all of the logos here, you will see the names of the regulators, both in English and the Irish language. And that's because in Ireland, they do have the Irish language. So when you get there, you'll see it on street signs, even on the buses, you'll see the names written in both languages. You don't need to demonstrate your level of Irish for registration purposes. You do need to demonstrate your level of English, but I'm sure whilst you're there, you will pick up some of the words. I certainly do in my short trips when I go over, and it's such a rich and beautiful language. And there's something that we have, which I'll share a bit later on, that can also help with your integration there. So now into the OET test. So as we said, we are profession specific, but what does the test look like? So like other English language tests, and just to remind you, we are assessing English, not medical knowledge, there are 4 subtests. So listening, reading, writing, and speaking. It's important to point out that the listening and reading subtests can be on any of the 12 professions. But remember, the answers are there. The answers are in the text or in the audio provided. What you need to do is use the skill to find them, okay? We're not assessing your medical knowledge, we're just seeing if you can understand the English that's being presented to you. For the writing and speaking tests, however, they will be specific to your profession. So let's have a look at this in a bit more detail. And the way that I'll do this today is actually by looking at the difference between the OET test and IELTS. And the reason for this is because the healthcare regulators in the UK and Ireland do accept IELTS academic or the OET test. Now, for both of them, you're going to have to use your results within 2 years. But what's the difference of the test? So this information came from the IELTS website, just to confirm. But when you look at the IELTS academic test, it was designed for university and higher education study. Compared with the OET test, it was designed specifically for healthcare professionals and clinical communication. So that's the core difference. And that's why when you go into the IELTS academic test, you're going to find different topics because it is across higher education. So if we look at the listening test, for example, it's 40 minutes, there are 40 questions in the IELTS academic test, and the content focuses on education and training, and the topics will vary. Compare that to the OET test. The time is the same, 40 minutes. Okay, we've got a couple of extra questions, but all of the extracts that you listen to will be related to healthcare. So in part A, you're going to listen to 2 consultations between a healthcare professional and a patient. And as you listen, you complete the notes using a word or short phrase, essentially reflecting the skill that you'll need to do in your job, picking out that key information that you hear. Part B, you will listen to shorter extracts, very similar to what you'd come across in the workplace. So it might be 2 healthcare professionals doing a handover, might be a healthcare professional, another patient, and for each one you answer 1 multiple choice question. When you get to part C, this is where you get the longer listening extract. So it could be a presentation, it could be an interview, but these kind of dialogues that you're listening to, or the extracts you're listening to, they're very much like what you're going to come across in your professional development. So if you go, for example, to a conference and you're listening in the conference, you're answering questions based on what you hear. And again, they're multiple choice questions. This can really help you as well post-registration, because once you've registered with a regulator, both in the UK and Ireland, you are going to have to revalidate. And there are certain guidance on this, so specific times are given by regulators, so do have a look. But often as part of that revalidation, you have to do professional development. So maybe going to a conference could be part of that. So this can really help towards that. When it comes to your reading, so looking at the IELTS academic, 60 minutes, 40 questions. The content is of interest really to undergraduate and postgraduate students. So again, quite a range of topics. Compare that to the OET test. Every text you come across is specific to healthcare. 60 minutes, 42 questions, but there's a key difference. We have 2 papers in the reading test. The first paper, part A, is 15 minutes. That's 15 minutes. And the second part, for parts B and C, is 45 minutes. So for part A, people say to us quite often, that's really fast. What are we being asked to do, and how does that relate to real life? So in part A, you'll be given a set of short texts. If you do the paper-based version, you essentially get 2 booklets, one with the text and one with the questions. And using the information in the questions, you have to work quickly to find that information from the text provided. Now, how does that relate to real life? Well, imagine you're in the workplace, which is obviously a very stressful healthcare situation, and your colleague asks you for information that you need to find that's written down, maybe a dosage, for example. You have to work very quickly using what we call skimming and scanning skills for reading to find the right information, but also specific information maybe for your patient if it's a certain age group. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at, can you find that information while working under pressure, because you will find yourself in situations like that once you're in the workplace. Parts B and C, so I'll jump back. After part A, that paper is taken away, you don't get it back. Then you move on to parts B and C. So part B, again, short extracts, maybe like what you'd see on a notice board in a healthcare workplace. And then part C, you get those longer reading tasks. Again, like what you'd come across in medical journals, again, part of your professional development. Maybe if you're doing your training as well, you'll come across these texts, and using the text, you'll have multiple choice questions to answer. But we are looking at some more advanced skills here. So maybe something was said, but what did it actually mean? Next, we'll move over to the writing. So remember, this part of our test for us is profession specific. In the IELTS test, you've got 60 minutes for 2 tasks. The first task, they often say, is about 20 minutes you should spend on it, where you're describing a graph or a process. And then you usually spend about 40 minutes writing an essay. Again, it could be on a topic you're familiar with. It might be one you're not familiar with. Compare that to the OET test. You'll be given, for paper-based, 2 booklets, one containing case notes that are specific to your profession, and the other is your answer booklet, where you write a letter. Okay, so it's often a letter of referral using the case notes provided. And in the test, you will have 45 minutes, but the first 5 minutes are there just for you to read. And that's really, really important to ensure that you have that time to read the case notes in detail. But do remember, we're thinking about patient safety as well. So if you think back to my example before, even in our assessment criteria, when we're marking you, we will be looking at your grammar, your structure, etc. But on top of that, we will be looking at, was it clear to the reader what they had to do? So we have a criteria called purpose. We'll also check to make sure you picked up all of the key and important information from the case notes, because obviously that impacts patient safety. Finally, on to the speaking. IELTS Academic and IELTS General do have the same speaking. So it's 14 minutes. There are 3 sections, often a presentation and then a discussion with the examiner. At OET, we don't do that. You're a healthcare professional. It's best advice in the world, be yourself. So instead, we give you role plays. So the test in total takes about 20 minutes, but actually you're only being assessed on the role plays, and each role play is 5 minutes. So the total real assessment time is 10 minutes. It is specific to your profession. So a nurse, be a nurse, doctor, be a doctor. And you do these role plays with somebody called an interlocutor. So this interlocutor is trained by us at OET to do the test with you. And they will take the role of a patient, a relative, or a carer. And again, as part of the assessment, not only are we going to be listening for linguistic skills such as your grammar, pronunciation, but on top of that, we look at your clinical communication skills. Did you explain things in a way your patient would understand? Did you check information? How well did you give information? How well did you get information? Did you show empathy? Did you pick up on a cue? So all of these real life skills that are actually fundamental to helping you establish those relationships once you're here in the UK and Ireland. So enough about what I say about the test. What do the candidates say? So I've been so fortunate to have met a few of these individuals in person, and it's been really lovely to see how OET helped them on their journey through registration, both in the UK and in Ireland. And I think one of the key things that everybody says is that the OET test was easier for them. Not because the level of the test is easier, but because it was assessing them on the skills that mattered to them and that they use all the time. They also found, as you can see here from Prince, that actually preparing for OET helped with the OSCE test. So before I mentioned how OET can help with PLAB 2, OET can also help with other OSCE style tests, because we're looking at similar clinical communication skills as discussed. Also, we know OET can be more expensive than IELTS because we are profession specific and we do work with experts to put our tests together. But we've heard from quite a few candidates that they've actually saved money doing OET because they don't need to resit the test as many times as they would some other exams. They come to OET and they're using the skills they're more familiar with, and they're more likely to pass first time. So when it comes to booking your test, everything is through our website. So you go to oet.com, click on book a test, choose the version of the test that you want to take. Again, please do check with your regulator before you book. Choose your venue, choose your test date, and complete the online application form. I had a really good chat with Lisa earlier in the week, and I know that's something that does come up, particularly for those who use the international clock, which I know is used in Spain. When it comes to your computer-based test, we do use AM and PM, okay, rather than the international clock. So please be very careful when you're booking your test. I understand it will be flagged if you book between midnight and 6 in the morning, just to check you're happy with that. But I would say to you, double check before you hit submit, because once you submit it, it then goes through to our team. And then if you need to change the time afterwards, there is an administration fee to do that. So just want to highlight. Also, if you have any special testing arrangements, it's really important that you're comfortable on test day. So please do make sure that if you, sorry, I just had a pop up on my screen. If there's anything that you need on test day, please do let us know. So maybe you need larger print. You might need the paper, if you're doing it on the paper-based version of the test, printed on blue paper. If you are diabetic, you might need snacks in the room. If you're pregnant, you might need additional toilet breaks or snacks. Anything like that, please do let us know with what you feel comfortable telling us. You will need to provide medical evidence, but we just want to make sure that you have the setup you need for test day. Now, when it comes to scoring and results, it's important to point out that we don't have an overall score. You'll get a grade for each part of the test. I will point out, those of you looking to apply with HCPC, they do require an overall score, and we can provide that, okay? So don't worry, it's just when you get a result, you'll see each subtest. As I've said, please do check with each regulator on their requirements, but generally most of them will ask for a grade B, which is equivalent to 7 to 7.5 on IELTS. And basically a grade B, it is an advanced level of English, but what it means in principle is that you are an independent user of the language, and you can use it effectively and clearly, whether you're speaking with a healthcare professional or a patient, using the right register, tone, vocabulary, grammar is used accurately. There could be some inaccuracies or hesitations when, you know, for example, you notice me when I've spoken, I've used a few, but I'm not changing the meaning. I'm not losing that meaning. It's still making sure that it's clear and concise. So it doesn't mean it's 100% perfect, but it does mean that you're not impacting patient safety and quality care. When it comes to sharing results, you don't need to worry about going back to a venue to pick up any certificates, because we don't issue certificates at OET. So you just log into the system when your result is available, and you will be able to view it online. Now, because of privacy and data protection, you control who views your results. So once you log into the system, you can share it with regulator or your employer. For full details on who recognises OET, the link is here. I'll also share this in the chat shortly. But what you'll need to do is go into the system, grant them access, and then you will need to contact, for example, the regulator or the employer, providing them with your candidate number. But I would always say share it first and then provide your number. And don't forget, share it at the right time in the process. So finally, how do candidates prepare for our test? It's wonderful that I'm here with Lisa to share the great work that she does as one of our premium preparation providers. But from an OET perspective, I just want to point out there's a lot of information out there about the OET test. Some of it is reliable, some of it isn't. If you're not sure, go to Lisa or come to our website. So I'm going to show you an example. We've got a free test study guide that you can download to help you and direct you to good resources to help you for every part of the paper. We do provide sample tests, and these are great, but do remember, sample tests only assess what you know. They're not there to build the skills, okay? And it's all about demonstrating the skills at that level. So think about how you're using sample tests, okay? If you use them all at once, you're not going to build up the skill. And a good way to start is also with the free Intro to OET course that you can access. It takes 3 hours. You can access it at any time, but this is a really good resource. Even if you're joining one of Lisa's programs, do this and it will just give you that insight to the OET test to then help you in your discussions. We have an education team who do regular Q&A sessions on Facebook as well, if there's anything you want to ask us, along with practice books and ebooks. Some of those are to purchase, just to highlight, but you can have a look at those on our website if relevant. Writing and speaking guides as well, test taking tips. We've got so many blogs, and also a number of on-demand and live lessons and masterclasses. And here's an example of the study guide. Like I say, I'll put a link to this in the chat after my session. And finally, any support from OET. So please do contact us if there's any questions you have about your booking. If you've got questions about what regulators accept, please go to the regulator. So you can have a look on our website, but if it's anything about your registration with a regulator, please do go to them directly. We can't advise on the registration process. You've got to go to them directly. We also have information about what happens on test day. As I said, we want you to feel as relaxed as possible so that you can demonstrate the skills for your registration when it comes to the test. And finally, once you've got your OET result, if you're preparing for any job interviews, we've got some great resources here to help you prepare for your job interview in English as well. So there's a great article you can look at, and there's also a video that we did with Capital Nurse NHS England. So they look after NHS trusts in the London area. But we did this session a couple of years ago to really go into how to best prepare for your interview. We also have free destination guides to help you. So there's a QR code here. So there's one for the UK and one for Ireland. And these guides are really designed to help you integrate and just navigate a new life. It's a huge commitment when you're coming to a place for the first time. How do you set up your bank account? What's the name of the supermarkets? There's slang as well being used and local expressions. So these guides are incredibly helpful to just help you navigate that. And particularly for the one in Ireland that was just launched at the end of last year. And I do want to say a thank you if they are listening to NMBI and the Medical Council of Ireland, who very kindly reviewed their registration processes, which are included in the guide. So please do have a look at those. And for those of you coming to the UK, particularly doctors and nurses, we've created these Living the Language guides. They've got some great information on the NHS, but also give you some information on workplace communication, patient communication, topics to talk about with patients, ones you should avoid. So they're really useful, again, for that post-registration to help you in those first few weeks. And if you don't already, please do follow us on social media for other updates. So I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope I've not gone too far over time, but I hope you found that helpful. And again, a huge thank you to Lisa for letting me join you tonight.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Nadia. Full of useful information. And I thought it was quite interesting that there was some different information that you talked about than the one that Jack last month about the US and Canada. So that that I think is, really very useful information. So before we get to questions, what I wanted to do is just to introduce myself a little bit on what I do with students. So like I said earlier, I'm a premium preparation partner with OET, but I wanted to highlight 4 of the things that we do with our students. So number 1 is a little program. It's basically our initial assessment that we do with students that start working with us, and we call it our OET Quick Start. So that would be the assessment, and some people, we recommend that as a first step. You'll get a lot of feedback on the different parts of the exam and your skill level, and answer any questions that you have before you start preparing in the exam. And then almost all of the time, people will go into one-to-one classes with myself or with one of my other teachers. And the classes are all personalized for your goals, your profession. We have sample exams plus other resources that we share with you. And one of the nice things, there's so many resources on the OET website and that OET provides, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but in the classes, at a certain point, maybe we're talking about reading, I will highlight my favorite resources or something that I think would be useful for you, or one of the courses, the clinical communication, the booster, speaking booster is one that I recommend all the time. It's excellent with OET. The newest part of our offering is the Medical English Learning Lab, which is a learning hub and community that's designed either for self-study, so you could go in and practice your grammar, or learn different medical English skills that can help you in your career or in the OET exam. And one of the things that's a little bit different is everything is developed in medical English or in the healthcare kind of context. Whereas if you look at resources from many other schools and academies, there may be more business focused or socially focused or different things like that. So we do everything with healthcare in mind, and we add new resources and tutorials monthly. So that's the Learning Lab. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that we also have a newsletter, a weekly newsletter that goes out with all kinds of tips and tricks and information on medical English or OET into your inbox and email. And basically putting this all together, you have a full program that we would love to work with you. And of course, if you have any questions, you can certainly contact me with you don't need to sign up to talk with me. And here also I have all the information that you need to get in contact with us, including information about the Learning Lab, our newsletter, how to contact me if you have any questions. And I think everything is there. So we can get into a few questions. We had a few questions sent ahead of time, and if anyone has any questions, you can enter them into the chat as well. And I think Nadia is going to answer the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for sending in this question in advance. It's something to point out about working in Pakistan. So Pakistan is on the World Health Organization safeguarding list. So what that means is there's no active recruitment taking part in Pakistan. However, as an individual, you hold the right to apply for a job here in the UK or in Ireland. So for further information, particularly for the UK, there's some guidance actually on the Department of Health and Social Care website that you can look at. So I hope that's helpful.
Perfect. Great. And let's see what the next question is. I think this is a question I was going to answer, is how much study time should be dedicated to get a B in OET if someone has an F2 level from Fatima in the UK. From a teaching perspective, from students that come to me, candidates that come to me to help with preparation, if you come with a B level, and I've tracked this with my students, the average time that is needed, doing your homework, doing the classes with me and different things like that, it has been 3 months. Now, I've had some people that have done it in as little as 1 month, and I've had some people that have taken over a year. So it does depend on the level. But with a B, if you are following, with a weekly class, and our classes are 90 minutes, then typically it's about 3 months. And I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit, Nadia, about anything with that question from a different perspective, maybe.
I think it's like you say, it just depends on as well how much time you can dedicate around, how much you can use English outside of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing to bear in mind. So for some people, it can take a shorter amount of time, but they are doing more hours within a time period. So I'd say always start by knowing what your level is. So even if you are B2, whereabouts on the scale you are, and then take into account as well how much time you can dedicate to that study to build up the skills that you need to reach that level that's needed, which is often a C1 for registration.
Yes. And when I start with a new student, we always do the OET Quick Start program that I have. And in that first class that I do with them after they do the assessment, I can tell them a lot about where I think they are, how much work I think that they will need to do, etc. So you get a lot in that first step, and it's really, really important to help them plan as they move forward. Great. Let's see what the next one is. This is an interesting question. Can you help if it's in another field? I can maybe mention a little bit, and then Nadia, if you want to say something about that too. There are 12 professions in the OET exam, so certainly look and see which profession that would be required for you with the registration that you want to do. With my students, usually it's a nursing or medicine. That's the most common that we work with, but we have worked with pharmacists, dentists, veterinary medicine, So, and we would be comfortable working with any of the 12 professions as well. So if you're talking about those fields, then I would say yes. Don't know if you have anything to add, Nadia.
Not really for me. So like I think as Lisa said, OET is specific to the 12 professions. So those are the ones that we can help with and towards your registration as well. So because I'm not quite sure which field it's referring to, I would just say check with your regulator, have a look to see that OET is accepted. So maybe if in this case, if it's an allied healthcare professional looking to register with HCPC or CORU, please just go to their website and just double check. I hope that helps.
Yes, perfect. And I think we have one more question. Are the requirements for each profession the same for all parts of the UK or Ireland? Because I know in the webinar we had last month, the United States and Canada, there can be big differences or some differences between states in the US and between provinces in Canada. So we wanted to ask the same question related to the UK and Ireland.
Yeah, so it's a very good question and a really important one. So between the regulators in the UK and Ireland, they may have differences. So like I gave the example with NMC and MBI, the grades do look similar, but there is actually a slight difference. So do make sure you're going to the right website to have a look. The regulators do cover the whole country though. So just with what you just said there, Lisa, on a state by state basis in the US, if you're looking to register in the UK, so that's England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, you're registering with the regulator that covers all of the UK. The Irish regulators as well, they cover the whole of Ireland. So I would just say check with your regulator, but there might be some people who are maybe looking at options for both. You know, maybe you're in that situation, you're not sure yet between the UK and Ireland. Go to both regulators' websites just to make sure you have the correct and most up-to-date information and you understand their registration processes as well.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that, because I know it's a lot of information with everything they have to do with the exam, with the regulators, with immigration, job hunts, interviews, everything. I don't see any other questions in the chat. We have one last opportunity if anyone wants to ask something. So I think from my perspective, I want to thank Nadia again for joining us here today, and it's been a pleasure to have you. And it's wonderful to be working with an exam with an organization that allows us to do these types of webinars. I think it's really beneficial for candidates out there to see the different perspectives and to see us working together.
And thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely, and I really hope that people have found the information helpful. And if there are any other questions that do come up, particularly around bookings, please do reach out to us and contact us on OET.com. And like I say, if there's any other questions about registration processes, best to go to your regulator. So hopefully we've pointed you in the right direction to reach out to them directly as well.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
No worries.